Except for the Jewelry by Jack Gilbert. I don't really have a full backstory as to why I chose this. But I was talking with my brother who he's like had an English major, and we were just talking about poetry, and we stumbled upon this. So it's let's see. Okay, I'll read the poem first. And we'll talk about it. And she said, "We must talk no more about ecstasy. It is a loneliness." The woman wondered about picking up her shoes and silks. "You said you loved me," the man said. "We tell lies," she said, brushing her wonderful hair, naked except for the jewelry. "We try to believe." "You were helpless with joy," he said, moaning and weeping. "In the dream," she said, "we pretend to ourselves that we are touching. The heart lies to itself because it must." So, that's the poem. I kind of just like cut and paste some stuff. But basically, the poet, I think later on in his career, became a poet, but I believe he took off and traveled all throughout Europe and taught American literature and just kind of traveled throughout. But all of his poems are about love, and he's published I think like 5 books, and just the central theme in all of his poems are about love. I like how he was described as defiantly unfashionable and dismissive of careerism in academia. And like I said, he lived outside of America for most of his life, and he published 5 decades. But all just kind of briefly looking at all of his poems, they're all pretty short. I don't know, I would say 1 to 5 stanza for the most part. And then in an interview when he was quoting his career, it said, "It's not a business with me. I'm not a professional of poetry. I'm a farmer of poetry," which I thought was pretty interesting. When you think of farming, you kind of think of like cultivating and just, there's so many layers to that. It's just a vast, it's just so vast, and it's not just honed in on one thing. And then somebody quoted about him that he takes himself away to a place more inward than is safe to go. From that awful silence and tightening, he returns to us poems of savage compassion. And he's a more, obviously, he just died about 10 years ago, so more recent than somebody like, obviously, like Ernest Hemingway or Emily Dickinson or something like that. Then I just went on to kind of analyze his the poem. And like I said before, like the theme to me was about love and like self-preservation. There's one stanza in the poem, and when quoted, "You must talk no more about ecstasy, it is a loneliness," I interpret that to mean like the feeling good, so like ecstasy lends to feeling bad, because loneliness is what comes from eventually feeling good. "You said you loved me," the man said. "We tell lies," she said. So he's wanting more. And so there's heartbreak, and she's like misled him. And when she says we tell lies, so we tell lies in the midst of feeling high off of ecstasy. So ecstasy obviously isn't what she's referring to is like the drug, well, like popping a pill. It's more of like the feeling, and so it's that high, like that feeling of I don't know, like the lust, and what when I read the poem, I don't know if it was like a one night stand or like just like a rendezvous or just like a short. Well, I don't know if she would say I love you if it was a one night stand, but it was just more of like a short term relationship, maybe not such like a marriage. And then the naked except for the jewelry, and it's like when you're naked, you're like raw and vulnerable, but she's gonna be naked. But her glam, her jewelry shines bright to mask the darkness that she must feel inside, or the loneliness, or the hurt. Okay, so we try to believe. So it's emphasizing again, trying to believe that you're an idealistic and glamorous. So idealistic meaning like this picture perfect, you know, what we're the typical, just kind of, you know, not so vulnerable and more like free spirit, more or less. And so like this glam, so like this flawless figure, when in fact you're just a human and you're flawed like everyone else. Says you were helpless with joy, he said. So she was like empty inside and wouldn't let anyone in, but there was something about her that attracted him. And she was still magnetic and like being joyful, but lacking, like as in like a mineral or like jewelry to like stick. That's kind of how I interpret that. And the dream. So the dream could be like life itself. And then we pretend to ourselves that we're touching. So like to pretend, that could mean like it's ingenuine. And like this intimacy is just fake. And so like the last line, tie it all together. And I think this last line is quoted when I was kind of reading through articles about the poet Strigover. This line continued to come up as like a famous line that he was known for. The heart lies to itself because it must. So your heart is so fragile that it has to lie to be protected and safe. So like self-preservation, like you're trying to keep yourself safe and protected. So the patterns that I saw, I just kind of, there's like lots of quotes and conversation, reflection, short phrases, but with loaded meanings. I didn't see any rhymes, although the end sentence ties it all together in a powerful line that is incomplete. And the visual patterns was like a short paragraph. I didn't pick up on any rhythms or meters. So yeah, all together, it was just kind of, I'm sorry, it's just my notes. You can see here. Yes, how many minutes am I at? I'm just down here.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, that was my full analysis on my poem. And I guess I'll just end it by concluding that, like, the jewelry is masking our vulnerable, like, raw selves, and that's how I kind of feel like the title meant. All in all, I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions or want to add reflections? Great.
The origin story of your choice of this poem,
Yeah.
I'm not believing it.
Really?
It seems way too random for such a specific choice. You didn't choose any of the poems that were assigned. You didn't choose any of the poems by any of the people in class that we didn't read that they also wrote that you found someplace else. You didn't choose anything from the world of music, which is vast. You talked to somebody else, a family member, right?
Brother, yeah.
Who, an English person who could help you with poetry. And you really quickly went straight past the decision part of that, which is this poem. I've never heard of Gilbert. I've never heard of this poem.
Oh, interesting.
But a lot of the stuff that you were saying about it was resonating with me. And I think somewhere in there, the choice was made in terms of what was going on in your interaction with your brother and your interaction with this assignment. And then when you came across this, something about it must have spoken to you that you've glossed over, that I think everybody in here is just burning with curiosity to find out. And I'm just trying to open up the door to the curiosity that they were about to escape without hearing anything from you before you sat down.
Oh, about my selection and how I got here.
Is there more to it, or was it really just whatever?
I mean, it kind of was whatever, but I mean the title itself is pretty catchy and like kind of relatable in our day and age. It's not about, you know, a swan or something more back, you know, the 1800s. So you got like the jewelry, you got the ecstasy, you got the heart that needs to be protected. It all kind of like ties together. So it's, I guess, easy to relate to and pick up on the themes and the symbols and lend for, you know, a relatable analysis in that way. But yeah, honing in on the that exact poem and that exact poet kind of just threw some things at me, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, I told him I was going to do Tupac, and he told me that was shit, and so then...
What? Tell us more about that exchange right there. Because, yeah, you talked about Tupac in class last time.
Yeah, I know. I thought I was on to something.
And I thought you were going to do that, and you were going to do that, and then you talked with somebody else, and they used the word shit, and then you shifted to something completely random.
I know.
That, to me, is extremely significant.
I really
in
love
some
Tupac.
way, I don't know.
I love Tupac, but I think he was thinking I was being, like, for lack of a better word, like, ratchet, and, like, picking up my...
Ratchet?
Yeah. And he gives me a lot of shit, and he's younger than me.
Oh!
But he, you know, he has a master's, so he thinks he's, like, way smarter than me. And I think he's trying to, like, you know, trying to give me more of a variety and open my poetry world, steer away from Tupac.
Uh-huh. It sounds extremely elitist and judgmental. And I'd like to, if you'd like, we have time, you could go on YouTube, play the Tupac tune, and then talk about that if you'd like.
No, I'm okay. I just feel really good about my analysis.
Okay.
He sounds like her brother sounds like the complete opposite of you guys.
Of me?
Nice.
Yeah.
He's like complete opposite of the mentality of free mind. He seems more like this is a professional standing kind of mentality.
Yeah, which is, I hate to use it, that's fucking ironic because of the song that was chosen had to do with a poet that said fuck you to academia, more or less. The way that Tupac would as well, the way that Notorious B.I.G., back to the video that we first watched, there are a lot of people out there that would look at, say, hip hop, for instance, to say that's shit if you think it's poetry. There are a lot of people who think that. There are a lot of people who think that about country music. It's shit. It's not poetry. There's nothing poetic about Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash, right? It's just kind of an American tradition that has to do with very stereotypical crap that we don't want to hear about anymore. In fact, a lot of those people are racist, right? And then a lot of these people are something else or whatever. It has a lot to do with stereotypes. And so to have that kind of attitude, but then to pick that song, to me, the irony of that is excruciatingly significant.
Yeah, I can see where you might think that.
I want to hear about Tupac. Does somebody else want to just get up and, Tom, you want to get up and talk about Tupac?
I do not want to talk about
I do have one comment on the part here. When you talked about the ecstasy portion and like the one night stand and all that, it made me think about the like the honeymoon phase of a relationship. That strong burning ecstasy that happens. That's when most people will accidentally slip and say I love you because they're caught in the moment. So that was just my thought process with that whole thing. It was just that honeymoon phase, that first couple months of a relationship, where things are moving, more physical, usually more into that.
Totally.
And then they're probably getting out of the honeymoon phase and realizing, wow, you're an asshole. I don't want to be around you.
Yeah, or vice versa. Yeah.